Hello, and welcome to Two Pews in a Pod. Join us as we explore faith in a modern world at Evangelical Lutheran Church in Frederick, Maryland. Now here are your hosts, Pastor Paul Baglios and Deacon Megan Wyant.
I'm Paul Baglios.
And I'm Megan Wyant.
And we welcome you to this conversation between the two of us. This is the third in 4 planned episodes, which we're talking together about our experience in the vocation of ordained ministry. Today, we're going to talk about something that ordained people are often very reluctant to talk about. I commented a moment ago to Megan before we began recording that in my own experience, often when a group of ordained people get together, many enjoy sharing what have been some of their happiest and most encouraging successes, measured in one way or another in their role as ordained ministry leaders. And that's a good thing to do,
right,
to share encouragement, to share good news. But I also came to believe some years ago, and this is part of my ongoing learning about leadership, not only leadership in ministry, but any sort of leadership, that one of the things that can help us to grow as leaders is if we are able to take stock of, to acknowledge, to assess, reflect upon, and learn from mistakes or failures that we have made.
Right.
And that may not be a popular topic in conversation among the ordained, but I think it can be very important in terms of how we grow in the capacity to act as ministry leaders. So because Megan has been ordained not yet a month as of the time that we're sitting here to record this episode, surely there are no mistakes or failures that she can call to mind. But sadly, over the 40 years that I've been ordained, there are many. And as I thought about this, I thought I'm going to describe one and try to do this in a way that gives enough detail. Okay. I don't know that any of the people involved in this situation would ever be listening to this podcast, but out of respect for people and names, I'm going to describe in a previous call in which I served as a pastor. This was a congregational call. We once, in the congregation, stumbled our way into what proved to be a very taxing and distracting and needless internal bit of conflict. It came about because there were many people who were very active in a ministry of the congregation that needed to use on a daily basis facilities on our church property. And at the same time, there were others of the congregation who began increasingly and more frequently to express to me their sense that this particular activity was disruptive to work that they were doing. So the question came about, could we relocate to a different space in our church property this large and busy ministry activity that happened on a daily basis? And we began to make arrangements, in fact, to do that relocation. And we did this thoughtfully and carefully, but we did it without engaging the people who were part of this big, busy daily ministry activity. It didn't occur to me, and it didn't occur to others who were involved in the planning that oversight was negligent on our part. It certainly wasn't intended to be in any way insulting or demeaning, but we found ourselves with a minor storm of internal conflict in the congregation as some of the people began to protest their ministry activity being relocated to a different space in the church property. And they were really protesting the relocation.
Right.
And then added to that, they were protesting the fact that they had not been drawn into this decision, that the decision had been made. It was affecting what they did and what they valued. And they were, what I was able to understand, even if they couldn't articulate it, is that they felt that something that had central importance in the daily and weekly rhythm of our congregational life was being shunted to the margins.
Right.
That they were being, in a sense, demoted. They were being pushed aside. As I say, it was massively distracting.
Yes.
All kinds of ill will was generated, all kinds of ill will was expressed in interpersonal relations. It was a cranky, crabby, angry, unhappy season. We did eventually weather that storm. But I was realizing, moving through the storm, that we had made massive errors along the way. And I'll say, when I say we, including me. It had not occurred to me. First of all, I was a little too eager to take to heart what I had been hearing by the much smaller number of people who were objecting to the noise and the busyness of this activity. I was too eager to assume their point of view and their experience. I didn't take the time to sit and listen to others who were involved. I didn't make the effort to try to bring people together to reach a happy consensus that might have supported all. I don't know if that would have succeeded.
Changed anything? That was my question.
But nevertheless, not trying was a major failure on my part. Reflecting on that, while it was occurring and in the aftermath and in the years since then, I would like to say that I learned several key lessons. So here's what I think I have learned. You may well know that I have not learned these lessons at all, because you might think of things here at Evangelical where those lessons I have not applied. But one was to try always to keep myself, your sermon again, from just reacting. That if somebody is presenting something to me, especially if they're saying, what are we going to do about. That it is far better, it proves far more helpful that I don't try to offer a snap answer to that I sit with it a while, let it stew. The impatience that some people may have to see a change immediately instituted, that may not be wise, and I need not to let myself carry the pressure of their impatience.
I love that saying, the pressure of their impatience.
Thank you.
I think we get.
Write that.
I know.
Down.
Write that one down. No, because I think that's what we get drawn into those conversations all the time. Where people want an immediate reaction. That will get them what they want.
Yes.
Ultimately.
And
it's what do you think about this? However.
So one of the lessons that I think I learned from that ordeal was, if somebody is bringing something to me, and there may be merit to it, before I begin to move or think down the road, I'm going to just let it sit. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to let it sit in me for a period of days or weeks or months. And then find ways to inquire what others are thinking. Without necessarily drawing people into some sort of contest of who's going to get their way in this decision, but to try to educate myself, what's at stake for other people in this matter? If somebody feels strongly about this, whatever this may be. Why? Why do they feel strongly about this?
Yeah. Well, I think whenever we're working with people and that this, what we do, right, our role is people, and knowing and having that massive failure, I'm sure helped you. I'm sure you see down the line how that has helped you manage other experiences that were similar, or maybe not, but you were able to use those tools.
Well, and I think of that word that you just used, manage. Another bit of learning about leadership that I've tried to internalize is the only thing I can manage is me.
Yeah.
I can't manage a situation. I certainly can't manage other
people and how they respond. Yeah.
But I can manage the way I listen, the way I act, the way I respond, better than reacting. The way I try to gather in my own awareness and understanding what are the relevant, what are the pressing criteria and considerations, and how do you arrange those and sort those out? Can they be prioritized? So many times in the life of any community, even if it's the small community of a household, I think of the community that my wife and I share in marriage. So many times a decision needs to be made, and not all parties to it are going to be equally pleased or happy. But how can we do those things together so that community is not damaged?
Yes, exactly.
And in the situation, the story that I'm describing, for a period of time at least, community was damaged.
Right.
We had people with hurt feelings who in turn became hurtful toward the feelings of others.
Right, because that's what we see, right? Those ripples are good and bad when those things happen. We talk about the ripple a lot of, like, you make a positive effect on somebody and it creates ripples, but it's just as, that happens as well when things don't go bad. It creates ripples and often touches places you never thought it would. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, I don't, like you said, I've only been in ordained ministry for 3 weeks as a...
Not yet time for anything.
I know. I have not failed at anything, but having spent 13 years working in ministry, in leadership, I've made plenty of errors. But since this is my context and has always been, it's a careful, I don't want to be throwing out too much. Like, here's all the things I did wrong. I'm your new hire, but also here's 13 years of errors. But I will say one of the big overarching lessons that took me a lot to learn, because I was a teacher beforehand, and you learn how to facilitate lessons, you learn how to handle classrooms and behavior management and all of these things in this little bubble, that I really had to learn to let go so much of control when I started in ministry. And it's a lesson that's been ongoing for me, of not allowing in or not being as open to others coming in, because I have a bubble. I'm protecting, working with children, I'm protecting this group that I work with. And so it's very difficult sometimes to let the guards down to let other people in. And some of that is safety, and some of that is concern over, how things are going to be taught. But a lot of it too is just, it's my own comfort. It's easier for me to do it. I know I do it well. I know I enjoy it. But that means constantly taking on more and more and more. And so early on, especially when I was helping rebuild our faith formation programs, it was a lot of work to take all of that on upon myself and not be fully embracing other people getting involved. And that was really difficult, and I burned myself out really quickly over the first couple years that I worked in youth and family ministry. I was feeling quite burned out, and I had to take a step back and really let my guard down and I had two people who I really trusted, who kind of I was allowing in, and then that turned into more and more people. Because I realized I can't do it all on my own, and I can't be the best person in that position without sharing the load and letting people in under my mantle. But that was a really difficult thing for me to do, because I was taking kind of this small classroom model and planting it in a context that it did not fit. And I had to really grapple with what is that? How does that look? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's tremendous wisdom, and that's good learning on several
It was
counts.
such good learning. Yeah.
I empathize because I know, especially if there's been some project, some aspect of our life together in this congregation or in other settings in which I have served under call to ministry leadership, when I have felt myself responsible in a satisfying way for something that seems to be working.
Yes.
I've learned to recognize that there can be for me a controlling impulse that takes over, whereby I want to make sure this is how this is going to happen
Yes,
from
exactly.
now until Jesus returns.
Absolutely.
And that can often lead to not hearing or not receiving the suggestions that others may make about what if we did it this way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's growth, right? That's allowing for growth and change, which I feel very comfortable with. But at that time, I didn't realize that was me also controlling that growth and that change.
And if it's not letting other people in,
Right.
if it's not letting other people express their own vocation as ministers by virtue of baptism, if the ministry of the congregation is not being borne by the hearts, the minds, and the hands of the people,
right,
then that in itself is a major failure.
Correct.
Even if in the short run things seem to be going well.
Exactly. Well, and that's part of it too, is I had realized the dual things I learned was, one, right, I have to let the guard down and allow Spirit to be at work. And then the other side was that I was not the one in charge of this anyways at the end. Like I am here and ready to do this work, but I was taking it all on myself and was not praying, was not spending time really being faithful, because I thought I have to do all these things, and I was not relying or leaning on God. And the teachings that I would teach, I was doing it all. And that's a terrible model for other people to look at a leader, but and yes, it burned me out, but it was as a Christian and a faithful person, I realized at one point, trying to recruit for an event, and it might have been VBS, going, oh my gosh, we're just not getting the same volunteers that we did the first year, and what are we going to do? And finally I thought, well, maybe, I've done everything. I've sent the emails, I've knocked on doors, I've made the calls. I guess I need to pray. Fine, I'll pray about it. And I tell you what, though.
Prayer is the act of desperation.
Right? I know, right? I did it backwards.
Instead of the initiative.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
I did it backwards. I did everything, I put all the emphasis on what I was doing. And then I went to prayer when nothing else that I was doing was working. Yeah. And you know what happened was I was praying for it over a matter of weeks, and then it was a non-problem. The people started coming, and I thought, well, of course. Like I was carrying it all myself, and I'd never thought to ask God. Yeah. Like, hey, help me with this. Help lead people to me and me to them, and connect the dots. So.
Well, and what you're saying too, so I'm going to toss this out here near the end of this episode. We didn't talk about this ahead of time. I'm going to toss out a hypothesis, a thesis to you, see what you think of this. And it's this: reaching a point of burnout is itself a failure.
Absolutely.
In leadership. Again, whether ministry leadership or other kinds of leadership.
Yep.
And that's a common theme that you and I both hear among a lot of the ordained. Yeah. I'm burned out.
Yes.
And then what often unsettles me is when I hear people saying, oh, I'm burned out, so I think maybe it's time for another call. Right. In a different setting. I'm always suspicious of that because so you're saying you're ready to take your burnt out self somewhere else.
Yeah, and think that it's going to be a different
that it's going to be different.
When really you created that burnout.
Yeah. Yeah. The challenge is, how do we conduct ourselves so that we don't start moving toward that point of burnout. Right. And maybe begin with prayer and... Yeah. Who'd have thought?
I'm so embarrassed. embarrassed.
Don't be embarrassed. I suspect it's a very common
I think so
tale.
too. Yeah, I think so too.
But thank you for sharing this and for listening to me. Thank you all for listening to the two of us. We're going to do one more episode in this particular series. I'm Paul Baglios.
And I'm Megan Wyant. Thanks for joining us.
As we move into the fall here at ELC, we're preparing for the wonder that is the upcoming Christmas season. With the busyness of this time of year, our episodes for Two Pews in a Pod will now be released on the first and third Monday of each month. We look forward to continuing our exploration of faith with all of you in the months to come. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.